The ballroom shimmered with golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung above like constellations, throwing reflections across the polished marble floor. Music drifted through the air, soft violins and piano blending into laughter, chatter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Emily stood at the edge of the room, clutching a glass of water she hadn't touched. To anyone watching, she might have looked like another elegant guest in her pale silver dress. But inside, her heart beat like a frightened bird trapped in a cage. She had promised herself she wouldn't come tonight. Parties like this weren't for her anymore. She hated the artificial smiles, the polished small talk, the way everyone seemed to know someone except her. But her best friend had begged her. "It'll be fun, Emily. You need this. You need to get out again." So she came. She put on the dress she hadn't worn in years, fixed her hair, and forced herself to walk through the grand doors of the hotel ballroom. And at first, she thought maybe she could endure it. Maybe she could stand in a corner quietly, sip her drink, and leave early without anyone noticing. But then she saw him. Her ex. Her chest tightened like a fist had closed around her ribs. He was across the room, laughing with a group of people, his arm draped around a woman Emily didn't recognize. His suit was sharp, his smile charming, the same smile that had once made her believe she was his world. The same smile that shattered her when he told her she wasn't enough for him. Memories came rushing back. The night he left. The words he used, so cold, so final. "You'll never fit into my world, Emily. You're too simple, too ordinary." Her throat burned. 2 years had passed, yet here she was, standing frozen like the hurt had never left. And then, as if fate were cruel, his eyes found hers. That smirk, that same cruel twist of his lips, as though seeing her here, alone, confirmed everything he'd said about her. Emily's fingers tightened around her glass. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't let him see her like this. Alone, fragile, forgotten. Her heart pounded. She needed a shield, someone, anyone, to hide behind. Her eyes darted desperately through the crowd. And then, she saw him. A man standing alone near the far corner of the room. He didn't look like the others. He wasn't laughing too loudly, he wasn't showing off. He stood tall, calm, with an unreadable expression, as though he were there but not really part of the chaos around him. His black suit fit him perfectly, yet he carried it with effortless ease. His eyes moved slowly across the room, thoughtful, distant. Something about him felt steady. Safe. Before she could think, Emily moved. Her heels clicked too fast against the floor, her breath shallow. She reached him like someone running from a storm. And without asking, without even knowing his name, she slipped her hand through his arm and whispered desperately. "Please, just pretend you know me. My ex is here." The man turned his head, startled by her sudden presence. His eyes, deep, steady, like midnight seas, locked onto hers. For a heartbeat, she thought he might push her away, confused by this stranger clinging to him. But instead, his gaze softened. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Of course," he said in a low, steady voice. And then his arm tightened around hers. Firm, protective. Emily's breath escaped in a trembling sigh. Relief washed over her. For the first time that night, she felt the ground steady beneath her feet. They began walking, his stride confident, guiding her as though they truly belonged together. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple. The man leaned down slightly, his voice quiet but sharp enough to slice through the music. "Is that him?" Emily swallowed, her eyes flickering toward the man across the room, her ex, now watching them with narrowed eyes. She nodded faintly. Yes. A flicker of something unreadable passed through the stranger's gaze. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He simply adjusted his arm, pulling her closer, as though to shield her from everything behind them. Her ex's smirk faltered. For once, Emily saw uncertainty in his eyes. And the satisfaction that bloomed in her chest was more comforting than any drink in the room could have been. Minutes passed, the stranger keeping her close as they drifted through polite conversations, stopping here and there where people greeted him with quick nods of respect. Emily realized with surprise that many seemed to recognize him, though he didn't stop to linger with anyone. He gave no names, introduced her to no one. It was as though tonight, in this moment, his only purpose was to be her shelter. When they finally reached the balcony, Emily let out a shaky laugh. Her hand slipped from his arm, though her heart still raced. I'm so sorry," she whispered, embarrassed. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You don't even know me. The man leaned against the balcony railing, his face calm under the moonlight. His eyes caught the glow of the city skyline below. You don't owe me an apology, he said quietly. No one deserves to feel cornered. Something in his voice made her still. It wasn't just kindness. It was familiarity. Like he knew what it was like to feel trapped. Emily blinked, then smiled faintly. A real smile, the first one all night. Thank you for saving me back there. He glanced at her, his lips curving just slightly. You saved yourself. I just stood still long enough for you to find me. Her laugh broke into the night, soft and surprised. And the way his eyes lingered on her, it wasn't pity. It wasn't curiosity. It was something gentler, warmer, as though her laughter itself was precious. They stayed there longer than either expected. The noise of the ballroom faded behind them. The city stretched endlessly below, but Emily's world felt smaller, more intimate. He asked about her, not the shallow questions everyone else asked, but real ones. What she loved, what she dreamed about, and she found herself telling him things she hadn't spoken aloud in years. About her love for painting, about the tiny studio she rented downtown where she tried to teach children art. About her struggle to keep it alive while working long hours at a cafe. He listened quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. His silence wasn't empty, it was listening. His stillness wasn't cold, it was presence. No one had ever looked at her that way. When she laughed at herself, embarrassed by how much she was saying, he shook his head softly. You have a beautiful way of seeing the world, he murmured. Her heart skipped. For a moment, she forgot why she had even approached him. She forgot her ex, her fears, her loneliness. There was only this man, this stranger, who felt more familiar in one evening than anyone had in years. Eventually, she realized she didn't even know his name. She chuckled softly. I just poured out my entire life story to you, and I don't even know who you are. For the first time that evening, he hesitated. His eyes searched hers, as though deciding something. Then he said simply, Daniel. The name hung between them. Simple, steady. Emily repeated it softly under her breath. Daniel. It fit him. Strong, but gentle. Honest. She didn't know, couldn't possibly know, that Daniel wasn't just a guest tonight. That he wasn't just some kind stranger who happened to be there. He was the host, the quiet force behind this entire event. The billionaire CEO whose power stretched across industries, the man whose name people whispered with awe. But to Emily, standing on that balcony with the night air brushing her hair, he was just Daniel. The stranger who said, I've got you. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she believed someone truly did. The night after the gala, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside blending with the echo of his voice inside her head. I've got you. No one deserves to feel cornered. You have a beautiful way of seeing the world. His words looped through her thoughts, soft and steady, like a hand brushing against her heart. She turned in bed, clutching her pillow. It was ridiculous, she told herself. He was just a stranger. A stranger who had been kind. Who had played along to save her from humiliation. That was all. And yet, the warmth in his eyes, the way he listened, the way he had stood with her like a shield, it didn't feel like an act. She hadn't felt that safe in years. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then, before she could stop it, tears filled her eyes. Because she knew that when morning came, he would just be a memory. Someone she'd never see again. People like him didn't belong in her world. The next morning, Emily forced herself out of bed and into her little art studio downtown. The cracked windows let in the pale October sunlight, catching the dust motes in the air. The space smelled faintly of paint and turpentine, with brushes and half-finished canvases scattered everywhere. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Children sometimes came on weekends for art lessons. But during the week, the room was empty, quiet. Rent was late again, and she knew the landlord was running out of patience. She set up her easel, trying to lose herself in colors and strokes. Painting was the only place she could breathe. Her brush trembled, though. Her thoughts refused to stay still. They wandered back to him. To Daniel. To the way his gaze had rested on her like she was worth seeing. She shook her head, scolding herself. Stop it, Emily. You'll never see him again. He doesn't belong in this life. And then, the bell above her studio door chimed. Emily froze, her brush hovering in midair. She rarely had visitors during the week. Turning, she expected to see her landlord. Or maybe a lost passerby. But instead, her heart nearly stopped. Daniel. He stood there, framed in the doorway, dressed not in a tuxedo but in a simple dark coat and open-collar shirt. In his hands, he carried 2 steaming cups of coffee. Her knees almost buckled. What are you doing here? His lips curved into that same quiet smile that had undone her the night before. You told me about your studio, he said, stepping inside. I wanted to see it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or ask if she was dreaming. He held out a cup. I guessed you'd need this. She took it, her fingers brushing his as she did. The warmth of the cup seeped into her hands, but the warmth in her chest was stronger. For a moment, all she could do was stare at him. You really came, she whispered. Of course, he said simply, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel walked slowly around the studio, his gaze moving over her canvases. His presence filled the room, not in an overwhelming way, but in a steady, grounding way. Emily watched nervously, afraid he'd see only the flaws, the mess, the imperfections. Afraid he'd judge the way others had. But instead, he stopped in front of a half-finished painting of a little girl holding a balloon. The colors were soft, wistful. You paint like you feel too much, he said quietly. Her throat tightened. No one had ever understood that. People told her she painted well, or that her work was sweet, but no one had ever looked into the heart of it. Tears blurred her eyes. She turned away quickly, pretending to adjust a brush. You don't have to flatter me. His voice was gentle, steady. I'm not flattering you. I'm telling you what I see. Her chest ached, because part of her wanted so badly to believe him. They spent the morning talking. She showed him her paintings, shyly explaining what inspired them. He asked questions, real questions, not polite ones. He wanted to know what her art meant, what feelings she poured into it. And when she confessed how hard it was, how she worked 2 jobs just to keep the studio alive, how sometimes she wondered if she should give up, he didn't tell her to be realistic, like others did. Instead, he said softly, your art matters. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. Her heart trembled. No one had ever believed in her like that. Days turned into a week, and somehow, Daniel kept showing up. Sometimes with coffee. Sometimes with pastries. Sometimes just with silence, sitting in the corner while she painted. And Emily found herself waiting for him. Her mornings felt incomplete without that quiet knock on the door. With him, she laughed more than she had in years. With him, the weight of loneliness began to lift. Little by little, he was stitching her heart back together, without even trying. One evening, as the sun set and painted the studio windows in shades of orange and pink, they sat together on the floor, surrounded by brushes and empty cups. Emily was telling him about the time she sold her first painting, how small and ordinary the moment had been, yet how it had felt like victory. She laughed, shaking her head. It was just a tiny piece, barely worth anything. But I remember thinking, maybe I wasn't useless after all. Her laugh faded into silence. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. My ex used to say I'd never make it. That I was wasting my time. That I'd never be enough. The words hung in the air like heavy chains. Daniel didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed with something deeper, something that wasn't pity but anger on her behalf. Finally, he reached over, his hand brushing against hers. Emily, he said softly, his voice low and certain, you are more than enough. Anyone who made you feel otherwise never really saw you. Her breath caught. Her heart beat painfully in her chest. The way he said it, it wasn't casual. It wasn't a line. It was truth, spoken with such conviction that tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face away, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm crying. Daniel's hand tightened slightly around hers. Don't apologize for feeling. It's the most human thing we have. Her tears fell freely then, but for the first time, they weren't from loneliness. They were from being seen. And when he gently brushed one away with the back of his hand, her heart nearly gave out. Because she realized then, she was falling for him. But even as warmth bloomed in her chest, fear gnawed at her edges. Who was he, really? Why did he keep coming back? Why her, when he could have anyone, be anywhere? She didn't dare ask. She didn't dare hope. Because the thought that he might not stay, that he might be too good to be true, terrified her more than anything. And so, she let the moment linger. She let herself believe, just for now, that Daniel was simply Daniel. The man who listened. The man who showed up. The man who made her feel like she belonged. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the secret of who he truly was about to shatter everything. For 2 weeks, Daniel had been part of Emily's world. He came quietly, never announcing himself, never demanding anything. Some days he'd watch her paint in silence. Other days he'd listen to her ramble about colors, strokes, and little joys only artists seem to notice. He never made her feel small. He never made her feel like her dreams were foolish. And Emily, against all the walls she had built, found herself opening her heart. Piece by piece, day by day, until she realized something terrifying: she couldn't imagine her life without him anymore. It happened on a gray Thursday morning. Emily was at the cafe where she worked part-time, serving customers with the usual polite smile, when she froze. There, on the cafe television, a news segment was running. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, and last night, Billionaire CEO Daniel Reed was spotted leaving a gala with new business partners. Reed, the elusive founder of Reed Enterprises, remains one of the most powerful figures in the city. Emily's hand went numb. The coffee cup she was holding nearly slipped. On the screen, a picture appeared. His face. Daniel. Her Daniel. Only he wasn't just Daniel. He was Daniel Reed, the billionaire everyone whispered about, the man whose name her ex had once worshipped, the man who seemed untouchable, unreachable. Her breath caught. The cafe noise faded around her. No, it can't be. But it was. The man who sat in her tiny studio drinking cheap coffee, the man who listened to her like she mattered, the man who brushed away her tears, he was the billionaire boss who could buy and sell half the city. Her chest ached. 1,000 questions flooded her mind at once. Why hadn't he told her? Was all of this pity? Did he only spend time with her because she amused him, because her small life was entertainment in his vast, glittering world? Her heart cracked. She set the coffee down before her hands betrayed her and spilled it everywhere. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't breathe. That afternoon, when Daniel arrived at her studio like always, Emily didn't greet him with a smile. She was standing by her easel, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her heart pounding like a drum. He walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee, his usual gentle smile on his lips. But when he saw her expression, he stopped. "Emily," he asked softly, "what's wrong?" Her throat burned. She wanted to stay calm, but the words tumbled out, raw and sharp. "Why didn't you tell me who you are?" Daniel froze, the smile fading from his face. "I saw it," Emily continued, her voice breaking. "On the news. Daniel Reed. The billionaire. The man everyone talks about. And all this time, you let me think you were just, you." His eyes softened, but his silence cut her deeper than words. "Was it funny to you?" She whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Spending time with the poor little painter who can't pay her rent. Was I just an escape from your rich, perfect world?" The coffee cups trembled slightly in his hands before he set them down. He stepped closer, but Emily backed away. "Emily, no," he said quietly. "That's not what this is." Her chest tightened. "Then what is it, Daniel? Tell me. Because I can't be another story you'll forget tomorrow." His jaw clenched. He raked a hand through his hair, like he was fighting himself. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, almost breaking. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to be Daniel Reed with you. I just wanted to be Daniel." Her tears fell freely now. She shook her head. "You should have trusted me with the truth. I was afraid," he admitted, his voice raw. "Afraid you'd look at me like everyone else does. With fear. With expectations. With walls. But with you, Emily. You looked at me like I was just a man. Not a name. Not a headline. Just me." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers desperately. "You asked me once why I was so kind. It's because I know what it's like to be left behind. To be told you're not enough. The money, the power, it never filled that emptiness. But when I met you, when you clung to me that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. His voice broke then, soft and trembling. I felt like I belonged. Emily's chest ached. She wanted to believe him, every word. And yet, fear still wrapped its claws around her heart. I don't belong in your world, Daniel, she whispered. His gaze burned with quiet fire. Then let me belong in yours. Dash dash dash. The silence between them stretched, thick with everything unspoken. Emily's heart warred with her mind. She thought of her ex, the cruel smirk, the words that haunted her, "You're too simple. Too ordinary." And then she thought of Daniel. The man who listened. The man who showed up. The man who saw beauty in her messy canvases and worth in her tears. Slowly, painfully, she realized something. He wasn't asking her to step into his world. He was stepping into hers. Her lips trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time they weren't just of pain, they were release. She whispered, "Daniel, I don't know if I can give you the kind of love you deserve." He reached for her hand, his grip steady, warm. "You already are." Her breath caught. And in that moment, all the walls she had built crumbled. Dash dash dash. Weeks later, Emily and Daniel walked hand in hand through the city streets. The air was crisp, the sky a deep velvet blue. She no longer flinched at the thought of being seen with him. One evening, at another gala, her ex spotted them together. His eyes widened, his smirk faltered. For once, Emily didn't feel the sting of his gaze. She didn't feel small. She didn't feel broken. Because Daniel's hand was in hers. Because she wasn't standing alone anymore. Her ex's face twisted with something like regret. But Emily didn't look back again. Her world was no longer defined by the man who hurt her. It was defined by the man who held her up, who saw her, who loved her not despite who she was, but because of it. Dash dash dash. On a quiet night in her studio, as they sat surrounded by canvases and color, Daniel whispered against her hair, "Do you know what you did to me, Emily?" She smiled softly. "What?" "You made me want to be just a man again." Tears filled her eyes, but her heart was light. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. And in that moment, she knew. The stranger she clung to in desperation had become the man who would never let her go. The man who would hold her forever.